You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYBC.
CYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WYBC. Whether you're joining us from one of our radio and TV syndicate affiliates or you're joining on the live stream or podcast stuff later, we're glad to have you because the news is just wildly insane. And I mean wildly insane because over the weekend, we saw the Strait of Hormuz open, and then it was closed. And then it was open again, and then it was closed. And then you had dueling foreign ministers arguing with dueling counterparts in the IRGC, to the point that Vice President J.D. Vance heading back to Islamabad for one more almost possible round of talks that the IRGC's already said they're not going to. It's going to be wild. And it was made more intense by a rumor that was started in the podcast sphere that the President of the United States is calling for the nukes. He said, give me the football. It's time to nuke Iran. This is the claim that was being made over the weekend by those who struggle tying their own shoes.
They recognize they've got some problems and got to try to deal with it. And then there was a report out that they had an emergency meeting Saturday night. And apparently, well, one report coming out of that meeting at the White House is that Trump wanted to use the nuclear codes, and General Dan Kane stood up and said no.
That's not a thing that happened. Now, not only is that not a thing that happened because those two individuals weren't actually there at that point in time, but also if there is some type of a situation in which the President of the United States suggests a nuclear option, it's not presented or even situated by the president going, I want to use the nukes, quick, I heard there's a lot of red buttons. Show me your widest selection of red buttons that light up with the atomic symbol on it. For strontium, maybe. I mean, that's not a thing that happens. And after that was fully debunked, then we got into foreign minister roulette, in which, first of all, the leadership in Pakistan, by which I mean China, was begging the United States and Iran to extend the ceasefire for another 2 weeks. Please, oh please, they said in languages that are not English. Please, US and Iran, please do more ceasefire because China is really hurting from a severe energy shortage because nothing comes into Iran, nothing goes out of Iran. And I'm not just saying that. Over the weekend, one ship returning from Iran on its way back one of the ships on their way back from several Chinese ports was making its way back to Iran. And the U.S. Navy said a couple of things like stop and hey and you there and turn around, don't be stupid. Well, this message broadcasted, well, don't take my word for it. Here was the message broadcasted.
United States warship 115. You are entering the area of a military blockade. This blockade of Iranian ports will be enforced and applies to all vessels regardless of flag. Any vessel that further intends to enter or exit an Iranian port will be subject to the right of visit and search in accordance with international law. If you attempt to run the blockade, we will compel compliance with force.
Now, what does that compelling compliance with force look like? Well, it looks like two things. Number one, it looks like a shot through your engine room. So essentially, picture a really nice hole through some ship metal, the kind of stuff that could really use some Belzona to clean it up. Well, this large hole in the ship appeared in this case in the engine room of the Tuska. So the crew of the Tuska was again returning from some lovely Chinese waters, taking home a little takeout. And the United States said, hey, guess what? You're not allowed through our particular blockade. And the ship said, maybe if we all just close our eyes like the toddler playing hide and seek for the first time, we can't see them, they can't see us. That didn't go very well.
Motor Vessel Toska, vacate your engine room. Vacate your engine room.
Now, the reason that the Navy is saying, hey, guess what? Your engine room probably want to get out of it is because it's about to get a brand new window installation, courtesy of the United States Navy.
We're prepared to subject you to disabling fire.
That's the horn of you done goofed.
Okay, we gave the flare. Now we're getting...
And boom. Now, I don't know if you guys know this about a lot of engines, especially seafaring engines. They don't really look good. They don't work very well with yard-wide gaping holes in them. not particularly effective. Then we got some footage out from CENTCOM of a helicopter being loaded with your favorite friendly neighborhood Marines, who then traveled through the air, landed on the Tuska, and took over the freighter, which was then, bragged about by the United States. Now, that's not, believe it or not, the craziest thing that happened in the Strait of Hormuz over the weekend. So you had ships doing the full U-turn experience. They'd get a little bit closer, and then they'd go back, and then they'd get a little closer, and then they'd go back. And the reason is because the IRGC is essentially split in half. And that entire apparatus of the IRGC, the Iranian the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, being split in half against itself, one group wanting to take tolls, the other group wanting to shoot a lot of boats in the water, see, they're at odds with each other. And then you have that entire group, which is at odds with the Islamic regime of Iran. You have a group of foreign ministers who the United States is really frustrated with right now because none of them knows who is in charge. None of them at all. So first of all, you remember that on Friday the 17th, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi announced on X that the Strait of Hormuz was completely open. The president then got out there and said, everyone bring a nice picnic lunch. As soon as you sign the agreement, you sign the dotted line, we'll go ahead and have a nice, beautiful party. And then the blockade would end as soon as the Iranians signed the agreement. So then you had another foreign minister that came forward and said, oh, we're happy to do this because there was a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. And a different foreign minister came out and said, well, actually, we're going to try keeping this sort of strait closed. And the other foreign minister was way out over his skis. I don't know if skiing is halal. So, we'll just use this as an example. Then you had Parliament Speaker Mohammed Bagher Ghalibaf, excuse me. He said that actually the United States maintaining a blockade is still an act of war. And so the strait is closed, which, given that the Trump said that the blockade would end once the agreement was signed, you realize why that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, you want us to take the boats away, sign the dotted line, and they say, wait a minute, those boats are still there. Oh yeah, you haven't signed anything. This is betrayal, traitor. Incredible stuff. That brings us to Sunday, in which the IRGC fired on several different boats trying to kind of maneuver through the strait. You had 4 cruise ships, the MSC Arabia, operated by an Italian-Swiss company, the Mein Schiff 4 and Mein Schiff 5. Yeah, nobody names boats like the Germans. Also trying to make it through the strait. And then the Celestial Journey, also making it through. They're a smaller Cyprus-based and Greek-owned cruise line. They didn't have any passengers on them, but they went ahead and just sailed right through and said, we'll patch it up later, and just sailed right through the Strait of Hormuz. So oil tankers and container ships aren't going through, but there were 4 just random European cruise ships that escaped. Incredible time. What does all of this mean? And this is really the key question. Now, far be it from me just to give you the end-all be-all. We have Pat Harrigan on the show a little bit later, representative from North Carolina's 10th, who's going to go through why some of these negotiations matter and what we're going to be looking to beyond just your very handsome and talented broadcaster here on the Daily Signal telling you what we expect in the future. Here's what I can tell you before we even get there. First of all, a guy by the name of Ahmad Vahidi. You say, I don't know who that is. True, he's been promoted about 6 times over the last couple of weeks. According to Michael Rothman, he has an extensive summary over the Institute for the Study of War, reporting that the IRGC commander, Major General Ahmad Vahidi, and his inner circle are sort of trying to get some control over Iran's military response and also its political decision-making. So now you have an IRGC Major General, the very model of a modern Major General, taking a moment away from his studies of information, vegetable, animal, and mineral, to now try running a little bit of political stuff. But President Pez Dispenser, President Pezekian, and the foreign ministers don't really want to do this. And I don't know if you know this, but if a guy from the IRGC walks forward and tries to speak on behalf of the country in Islamabad, that's not going to last very long because the Pakistani government doesn't like the IRGC. So it's a massive Category 5 mess. Radio crew, we're going to let you think on that for a second. Try not to, violate any ceasefires while we're gone. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. We're going to continue on the live stream unabated. All right, while those kids are away at commercial, what does this mean for the oil stuff? Because I don't know if you guys have noticed, gas prices are kind of high. Well, there are a couple of things I can tell you. First of all, from my colleague Elizabeth Mitchell, the Daily Signal's White House correspondent, the House of Representatives has Republicans putting their heads together, and some of them are expressing optimism that we can actually get gas prices down by a couple of levers of getting some laws through. I will believe it when I see it. And then some Republicans who are very, very, very pessimistic. But at the president's executive order desk, wiping out the old Donald Trump pen of justice here, doing a little something different. So the President of the United States signed late this afternoon the Defense Production Act determination on domestic petroleum output, covering large-scale energy, including natural gas. What does that mean? In the 1950s, we decided maybe the president should be able to, in a time of emergency with some military action, ignore a lot of the really, really dumb post-World War II regulations that FDR had kicked into focus during the 30s. So as you may recall, during the Great Depression, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, deciding that he really didn't want us to recover quite quickly, he did two things. See, he created a lot of regulations to screw over the American people, and then those regulations kind of kept us from recovering from the Great Depression as quickly as we could have. That keeping us from recovering came in the form of confiscation and regulation. So he confiscated a bunch of gold, and then he imposed a bunch of regulation. He took the Woodrow Wilson model, and he gave it a shot of steroids right in the arm. And so during the 1950s, Dwight D. Eisenhower said, you know what would be cool? If we were in a situation in which the United States needed to respond unilaterally right at once without a lot of annoying regulations in the way, maybe the president can say, we need all of our oil, all of our steel, all of our tech, all of our infrastructure moving in the same direction, and we need it right now. And so enter the Defense Production Act. It allows the president, and through Section 303, to provide federal funding, loans, loan guarantees, and direct purchases to expand production, prioritize contracts and resources for energy projects over other customers, expedite permits, that's the big one, waive certain regulatory hurdles, and speed up construction and expansion. Guys, this is what annoys the American people. We have a lot of oil underneath us, and I mean a lot of oil. Look up some of the survey maps. The United States be pumping all kinds of oil and natural gas through the wonderful veins of our Earth's crust underneath our feet, and Alberta's as well. Don't worry, Alberta, soon. But see, the thing is, you can't really get that oil out refined into gas stations if you don't pull it from the ground. And so the Defense Production Act allows the President of the United States to say, it's time, and start really amplifying and pushing forward production of natural gas and petroleum resources, along with the refinement of that sweet, sweet Texas tea. And that's something that is going to boost the American economy pretty substantially. Now, we didn't see the markets reacting to this yet today because he signed it after the closing bell. So what does that mean for us moving forward? If the United States is treating the U.S. oil and natural gas expansion like a national security priority, kind of like how during Operation Warp Speed, we got the COVID nightmare mRNA vaccine in a couple of months instead of a couple of years. This means domestic production kicking into high gear, which if you're going to do some kind of military operation, kind of makes sense. You can see the impact on the United States economy lessen while the rest of the world gets a little bit more addicted to sending their boats to the United States ports of, trade and oil refineries. Before we bring the radio crew back from commercial, the president pointed this out today in a massive series of Truth Social posts. And to summarize, says the Iranian leadership has forced hundreds of ships toward the United States, mostly Texas, Louisiana, and Alaska, to get their oil. Thank you very much. We're going to bring the radio crew back. Don't go anywhere. Way more news to cover. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
You want more news? You got it. And I'm not talking just about shady judicial shenanigans. We're going to get to some of those a little bit later in the show. Instead, we're going to talk about some of the really, really bizarre from the administration. You may have thought, just in the back of your mind, that when Kristi Noem left after it was found out that, she and Corey Lewandowski were having quite the affair, and her husband with, the big fake boob cross-dressing thing, that's really messed up and that's weird, right? And then, we had the subsequent sexual scandals from Eric Swalwell and Tony Gonzalez down in Texas. That kind of stuff is expected. Well, Labor Secretary Lori Chavez-DeRemer, this would be the union lady that the president appointed. This is, by the polling data, the least popular member of the administration on the Republican side. Why? Because union leadership really not popular with Americans. And when she would get into cabinet meetings, she would pitch some things that she would toe the line of the administration, but some of the things that she was asked to broker, that she was asked to prioritize, was not always something that was useful. For example, some of the regulatory priorities that she was given regarding the president's business on AI stuff, regarding some of the industry standards on manufacturing, always seemed to be a little less about getting things to the American people and more about a bunch of really arbitrary labor standards that don't actually improve working conditions. Because these were suggestions made by union leadership, not those who are actually on the factory line. And so Lori Chavez-DeRemer was not always an individual who was particularly popular on the Republican side of the aisle. It seemed like kind of a thank you for some UAW not going in on Kamala Harris right before the election. Well, now Lori Chavez-DeRemer has resigned from the Trump administration, not for any of this stuff, but because of an investigation by the New York Post earlier in the year, showing that, kind of in TMZ style, she was kind of spending a little too much time with, I believe, one of her private security. So Chavez-DeRemer, 58, will follow 4 other staffers who were all investigated and resigned amid the Office of the Inspector General's sprawling investigation. White House spokesman Stephen Cheng announced minutes after the report that Chavez-DeRemer would be leaving the administration and taking a job in the private sector. So the White House line is, quote, "She's done a phenomenal job in her role by protecting American workers."
Nope.
Enacting fair labor practices, easy there, Bernie, and helping Americans gain additional skills to improve their lives. All right, here's the real thing. So during the federal government shutdown in October, Inspector General Anthony D'Esposito had been expected to conclude a Labor Department investigation. A whistleblower complaint filed against the Labor Secretary in January alleged that she did a lot of drinking in office during work hours, created a hostile work environment with her top aides, and was pursuing, you guessed it, what is Steve, an extramarital affair with her security guard. Yeah, okay. So first of all, this is so common. People in high political positions with side pieces and mistresses and mattresses and really weird stuff. Not great. Also, it turns out that when you are in some kind of an affair, you also don't treat the staff around you particularly well. You will remember that with Secretary Noem. You may remember that with Eric Swalwell. You may remember that with a lot of other people who have been getting a little something in the side, especially with those in the company Inc. Then they don't exactly spend a lot of time treating their staff super respectfully because, if you can't treat your marriage respectfully, then why would you treat your staff respectfully? So in this instance, the complaint also claimed she committed travel fraud. Again, wow. By having those aides, Chief of Staff Ji-Hoon Han and Deputy Rebecca Wright, make up official trips to destinations where she could spend time with family or friends on the taxpayer dime. What? A pro-union official making up crap to spend company or organization expenses on? A former union official fraudulently spending union funds? No. In fact, I know that there are those right now who are, for example, on the Nestle floor along I-69 in Indiana, who are also members of a certain manufacturing or maybe even an electrician or trade union that are listening to this right now and are already nodding their heads, because this is a tale as old as time for those in the union. They pay union dues for union leadership to go anywhere they want on your dollar. I remember it during the teachers union time. And the reason that I left the helped over 200 teachers leave the Indiana State Teachers Association is because come Union Appreciation Week or Teacher Appreciation Week, the union would send everyone a little basket of fudge, and not like really good fudge that's either made homemade or from Brown County, Indiana's delicious fudgeries. No. They would send like really cheap crap mass imported garbage fudge, and then they would all take a little trip to some tropical destination to live high on the hog. So again, Lori Chavez-DeRemer, let the door hit you on the way out. Another thing, the Department of Justice is investigating whether major meatpacking companies engaged in criminal anti-competitive conduct in the U.S. beef market following concerns raised by President Donald Trump about rising prices. So in the middle of this entire cattle farmer and then meat processing industry series of economic issues coming from, again, some of the Biden administration's breeding practices. You guys do realize that they don't pop cows out of the womb and then in a month they're like on the meat market for T-bone steaks, right? That kind of takes a couple of years to get the cow to full height. I know we all like veal, but that ain't the whole meat market. The United States meatpacking industry, there had been allegations from ranchers in the middle of the United States that the cost they were, essentially what they were selling the meat, when they were giving the meat to the meatpacking companies and the deals and contracts they were orchestrating, Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins noticed the price disparity here is really, really weird. Because in a lot of states, and you'll know this if you live in some of these Midwestern states regarding the processing of your meats after hunting season, it's really difficult because of all of the regulations, and the meat packing industry is subject to a lot of regulations. These meatpacking industries realize that if you have a big enough company, that you're the only ones who can really stand up to all of the regulations over a period of time. You're the only one who has enough money to comply. You're not going to get undercut by Jim, who has some of the stuff to do some of the meat packing. And so what happens? Well, farmers like the one that supplies the meat for yours truly, Well Done Beef out of Greenfield, Indiana, they get ridiculous over a percentage of their costs. Sorry, the word's not coming to my mind there. A larger percentage of the overhead, that's what I'm looking for, is taken from local farms for the meat packing, and the larger companies that do the meat packing, well, then they kind of have a monopoly and they can continue jacking up the prices, because for smaller meat packers, it's getting more difficult. So the Department of Justice is taking a look over on that side of things. And that brings us over to the other administrative drama, Kash Patel and sippin' hooch. So the Atlantic filed a major, huge article alleging that Kash Patel has all of the problems on planet Earth. So it's a little unclear whether they're just doing kind of a book. They've changed the title of the headline, as Reuters has now pointed out, to just "The FBI Director is MIA." This is by Sarah Fitzpatrick over at The Atlantic. Originally, I suppose that it was that he's a raging drunk and, knocking into walls and stuff. But this seems to be kind of the route that The Atlantic is taking now. Radio crew, we're going to send you guys over to the commercial side of things, continuing on the live stream without the commercial break. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. So, again, all of the news on planet Earth to dive into. Now, when The Atlantic gets out there and alleges that essentially you're this guy at the office, have a little too much to drink every single day, which has kind of been the left's favorite rumor regarding Kash Patel since he got in the administration. The Atlantic, through Sarah Fitzpatrick, has this huge scathing article that not only is Kash Patel super duper drunk, but also he never shows up to work. Here's the first paragraph of this. On Friday, April 10th, as FBI Director Kash Patel was preparing to leave work for the weekend, he struggled to log on to an internal computer system. Wow, what a story. Just no one's ever had that happen before. He struggled to log in. No way. What are you gonna tell me next? Anyway, he quickly became convinced that he had been locked out, and he panicked, frantically calling aides and allies to announce that he had been fired by the White House, according to 9 people familiar with the outreach. 2 of these people described his behavior as a freak out. So I'm going to guess what actually happened here, because these texts will now come up in discovery because he's suing the Atlantic for defamation. I'm guessing he just said, I don't know whether to think that I've been like canned if I'm next on the chopping block or what. Because, Kristi Noem, and then Pam Bondi, and then questions about Kash Patel. Maybe that's the alleged freak out. Not exactly Katie Porter throwing boiling mashed potatoes at people, but still. It turned out that the access problem just appears to have been a technical error, and it was quickly resolved. So the half of the Atlantic article is suggesting that he thinks maybe he's on thin ice. Some people say he's been doing a lot of drinking at the private club Ned's in Washington, D.C. Ooh. And this is pretty much it. This is the article, is that he drinks. It's just, there you go. I mean, it's TMZ style stuff. Now, he doesn't like this. He answered a question on Fox News following. Here you go.
Magazine, the Atlantic magazine director is alleging that you have a drinking problem, that it is getting in the way of your work running the FBI. What is your response this morning to this article?
Look, Maria, you and I have been at this together for a long time, whether I was leading the investigation on Russiagate back in the House or my time in the Trump admin 1 and now. And the results, I say, speak for themselves. If the fake news mafia isn't hitting you personally with baseless information in Washington, D.C., then you're not doing your job. And it's louder than ever because this FBI, under President Trump's brilliant leadership in backing the blue and backing law enforcement, this FBI has the most prolific year in crime reduction in the United States history. A 20% reduction in the homicide rate, a 20-point drop in opiate overdose deaths. We have found and identified 6,300 child victims. 6,300 kids get to go home to their kids. That's a 30% increase. Seizing enough fentanyl to kill 180 million Americans. That's a 31%.
And by the way, this response goes on another 2 minutes, and I don't disparage him of that, because if you're going to answer a question about your job performance, the way that you answer that is, here is a list of things that I have done for the American people. And I will give him, as we always do, with the FBI bureaus around the branches, I should say, around the country, from Indianapolis up to New York, all the way down to FBI Atlanta. They have done a stellar job at capturing, as we're going to talk later, individuals who were acting as essentially terror weapon financier deal brokers for Sudan, Syria, Iran, not to mention a lot of more people accused or charged of child pedophilia, of possessing child pornography. We gotta move over and pick up the radio crew from commercial. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. We'll go over some of this record in a second.
The Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast. Kash Patel. He doesn't really like this Atlantic article. Originally, the headline that they had published for Friday 17th and then the following 18th was, quote, Kash Patel's erratic behavior could cost him his job. So referencing excessive drinking and absences, claiming, that, he's alarming all of his colleagues. They've now changed it, probably, as of today. Always interesting when the headline changes a couple days later to the FBI director is MIA. He responded by saying, look, in this administration, that's not the case. I have presided over investigations that have arrested a record number of violent criminals, of pedophiles, of those who have trafficked, taken, created, and sold child pornography, those bringing in fentanyl, working with the Department of Homeland Security. And he basically, his response, unlike Pam Bondi's, which was to say, this is all an attack on Trump, and then really saying nothing. His suggestion to the forefront, at least when he brings up his record, is look at all of the stuff the entire FBI has accomplished. When they're going after me, they're going after all of the fine men and women doing this work. That's a smart strategy. And I'm not someone who agrees with a lot of Kash Patel's decisions. That is, however, very smart. So he did come forward with his ultimate plan here for kind of how he's going to tackle this list of charges here, or I should say statements from the Atlantic. He has filed a $250 million defamation lawsuit. The Atlantic, of course, responds, as you'd expect, saying, "We stand by our reporting on Kash Patel, and we will vigorously defend the Atlantic and our journalist against this meritless lawsuit." So this is like lawsuit 475 against the Atlantic for doing this kind of crap. The kind of stuff that it is that they often do. So we'll have to see how it plays out, but this means that we are going to get into the discovery process, and we're going to get to see, I certainly hope so, either some kind of major settlement or these texts from all of these insiders who are constantly talking to the Atlantic. Now, the flip side, huge scandal for the Democrat side. And I mean, probably one of the most serious scandals that is just getting worse. We've reported on this repeatedly, that ActBlue, which is the Democrats' primary funding mechanism outside of the teachers' unions and George Soros. This is their, hey, donate to ActBlue. It's our donating platform. You go to this app, you donate to Democrats, and then we send it around. It's their primary in-source of money during campaign seasons from the grassroots. So ActBlue, as we reported all the way back in February of last year, they were under fire for taking a lot of foreign dollars, which you are absolutely not allowed to do. You are not allowed to take foreign money and use it in American elections. Originally, there was some suspicion that ActBlue had been donated gift cards, or that they had been getting foreign money and they had then spent it on gift cards that they then took and gave over to the Kamala Harris campaign. And then it got worse, because as we started looking through ActBlue's donor records, again, the IP addresses came from over there, the beyond, over the pond, separated by the Atlantic and the Pacific. And a lot of money was coming into ActBlue from foreign dollars. So according to a new House Judiciary report, when ActBlue employees were asked under oath about foreign fraud and whistleblower retaliation at this Democrat donation platform, they were responded to by pleading the fifth, saying, look, I can't say anything that's going to incriminate me. That's my constitutional right. When asked about, again, whether they knew foreign dollars were coming into ActBlue and Democrat funding, they responded by pleading the fifth 146 times. $146 times the Democrats' ActBlue employees said, I plead the fifth. They also, as we reported on a couple of weeks ago, withheld documents on this foreign funding to the Democrat Party platform from Congress. The New York Times reported on this, said, quote, ActBlue may have misled Congress on vetting foreign donations, its lawyers warned. Again, you can kind of go back and look at some of our earlier records on the show where we go through all of the statements that they said that even their lawyers said, wait a minute. You just lied? You just openly lied to Congress asking you about these foreign dollars? No. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to go plead the fifth on anything that might incriminate you. And so they then went and pled the fifth 146 times. So the committees deposed 5 ActBlue employees, including top staff responsible for fraud prevention. You know, the thing that's supposed to prevent you from breaking federal law. And this was just an opening kind of hearing to understand, without any kind of consequences from ActBlue, saying, hey, you need to tell us now what's going on. What were you ordered to do? We asked them 146 questions, according to the House Judiciary GOP account. They refused to answer a single one. Question: is there any reason you are unable to provide truthful answers to today's questions? Mrs. Taumi, on the advice of counsel, I must respectfully decline to answer in reliance on the Fifth Amendment. Have ActBlue executives ever instructed you to allow more fraud on the platform or weaken ActBlue's fraud prevention defenses? This should be an easy answer. Were you ever told to lower the barrier for entry? It's an easy one. Again, are you in the United States? A very simple checkbox kind of question. Hey, can you prove you're here with an ID, a passport, something, voter ID, ladies and gentlemen? And then even if they can't even say, well, maybe you forgot. So, in your, I forgot we were supposed to ask for them to provide ID, that you're a citizen if you're going to donate to American elections. ActBlue said, hey, Congress said, hey, listen, but did the executives ever tell you not to check if they were foreign donors? Did they ever say, hey, maybe you just leave this fraud prevention defense offline? Maybe you just shut off the antivirus. I don't know. Shut off, GeoTracker. They pled the fifth to that. Hoo boy. And then, because,
Answer there, the Daily Double.
Another incredible question here. Quote, have you ever been part of a conspiracy to launder foreign money into fraudulent donations for campaigns using ActBlue? That should just be no. I've never been part of a conspiracy. Your defense as a lower level employee should just be, I was simply following orders. And again, is that a great defense? No. Ignorance is not virtuous. Ignorance is not innocence. But again, I mean, at least take the offered hand to the life raft here. Attorney General Ken Paxton, following up on the heels of this, at 10:42 a.m. this morning, announced he was filing a landmark lawsuit against ActBlue for deceiving Americans by lying about its donation processes that allow fraudulent and foreign donations. Quote, the radical left has relied on ActBlue as a way to funnel foreign donations and dark money into their political campaigns to subvert our laws and compromise the integrity of our elections. ActBlue lied to Congress and to the American people, and I will ensure justice is served. It has blatantly ignored state law that prohibits deceptive practices, and it must pay for its illegal conduct. Fair elections are the foundation of our democracy, and I will work to ensure no illegal campaign donation flies under the radar. So what's going on with the rest of the party? Because as you might have guessed, Ken Martin, that dude is tight-lipped about this. Well, the Michigan Democrats had a little rally, and if you're going to have a little Michigan Democrat rally, you get Senator from New Jersey, Cory Booker, to get out there and, do a little bit of yelling. Hold on a second here. I pinky promise. Cory Booker, absolutely worth it. Here you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is a storm in our nation. There is darkness and wind. People are getting hurt. What we need is not from on high. We need foot soldiers of our democracy.
Now, I'm sorry. Saying you don't need God's help, what you really need are the builders of the Tower of Babel. We need foot soldiers for democracy. Again, right at the time that, lawsuits coming out that a lot of the dollars funding, we already know via Code Pink. Again, my colleague Tyler O'Neill at the Daily Signal, his report on Code Pink's foreign dollars coming in from China for socialist activism in the left. I mean, that's already bad enough, but directly into elections, yeesh.
Who in times of trial are willing to stand up. Will you stand for our democracy? Will you stand to get out the vote? Will you stand for our children? Will you stand up for our elders?
Well, unless those children or elders are receiving, like the Feeding Our Future funds, then I'm sorry, those are already reserved for Somalia. Or, maybe over in the New York side, we're pursuing legislation. Those old people are getting a little old there. Maybe just, do a little Canada and tell them to commit suicide. Unless we're those children or elders, that's totally fine. So, curious indeed. I do appreciate Chris Murphy from Connecticut rolling out here and suggesting at a socialist conference in Spain, taking your tax dollars and flying elsewhere, to Spain, suggesting that the Nazis are here. Again, interesting that he's losing it right amid this ActBlue and then, of course, the sexual assault scandals. Curious indeed. Radio crew will send you off to the commercial. I try not to take any foreign bucks while we're gone. We're going to continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast, foreign dollar free. So here, you can little Chris Murphy, yelling in Spain. Haven't you ever gone, to yell a little bit in Spain? Personally, I haven't. I try to do some of my yelling and stuff right here. This clip is provided by Western Lensman, great friend of the show.
So I am here as a United States Senator, a member of the Democratic Party, and I want to bring you greetings as well from a nation that is in crisis. I'm not going to sugarcoat the gravity of what we face right now in the United States. This is the most significant threat to American democracy since the Civil War.
So, since the Civil War, great. World War I, World War II, multiple attempted assassinations. I mean, one might say, the Zimmerman telegram actually saying, hey, Mexico, you join in World War I, we'll give you all of the, the Mexican land that you had for 4 years back, that kind of stuff. None of that. Terror attacks, actual open, calculated assassination attempt on congressmen. None of that. The greatest threat is the group that's currently investigating the foreign dollars funding here at the Global Progressive Mobilization Socialist Conference in Barcelona. Again, kind of, when you're at a summit hosted by the Partido Socialista Obrero Español, when you are hosting an international socialist conference and you're announcing the United States is under threat and attack on this foreign dollars that you're sending our way, yeesh.
Donald Trump in our country is trying to end our democracy. We are not on the verge of a totalitarian takeover. We are in the middle of it. He is trying to seize control of our courts, of our law enforcement, of our media, of our elections. His goal is oligarchic capture.
No, I'm sorry. I do like the oligarchic capture. Right now, the Department of Justice is currently in the middle of 2 big trust-busting lawsuit investigations. They are. I would love to get out here and say that, the big issue here is that you're a complete fraud and sham while your party at home is accused of everything that you're, currently accusing the presidential administration of. I mean, James Carville out there saying the very first thing we're going to do when we get back in office is we're going to pack the Supreme Court, we're going to add 2 states and secure the Senate forever and do a bunch of other really insane stuff. Again, I personally don't recommend getting out there and saying that. He has no problem. He wasn't actually the craziest. We also had Tim Walz doing the same kind of stuff.
We've got a feeble-minded, trigger-happy president who plunged us into a war where no threat was present.
Now, I will remind you, this guy said that Biden was totally cool. The feeble-minded, I appreciate that. I'm a little disappointed. I was really hoping Tim Walz would say, we got a fever, and the only prescription is more cowbell. He didn't do that. That would have been a lot better than this, to be honest.
With no clear objectives and no exit plan. We need to call that what it is. That's fascism. Or at least it's fascist curious, as they would be.
Now, I do appreciate the whole it's fascist thing. I'll remind you that Spain was under just straight up fascist rule longer than anybody else. So, I mean, calling out fascism in Spain, we got to bring the radio crew back from commercial. Again, not the move that I would go with, but yeah. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
So why would the Dems, want to actually get out there and pack the Supreme Court? Why make that the objective here? Why make that the thing you're promising? Whether you're talking about James Carville or you're talking about all kind of the left swing side media. Well, because the Supreme Court today had a couple of rulings that came down, or at least over the last couple of days. So of these particular rulings, there was one 7-2 decision in which the only dissenting written opinion was Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. And in this particular latest hearing, in a summary reversal, held that police had reasonable suspicion to stop a driver in Washington, D.C. after passengers fled and the guy began backing away. So originally you had a DC appeals court, which went on this weird tirade that cops really were being super duper extremely mean and racist and all this other nonsense. The cops don't have the right to, cops don't have a right to tell police officers that they can't, pull people over. Cops can't just get out there and look at those committing crimes and then uphold the law. Well, the Supreme Court ruled, again, 7-2, and Justice Elena Kagan joined the majority here. She was a liberal that sided with the rest of them, that said, yeah, police do in fact have the right to make a stop based on the totality of circumstances in a situation. Ketanji Brown Jackson, however, wrote in, contrast, she said, I cannot fathom how the 7 justices could second guess the lower court in rejecting the police claims. She claimed her colleagues of wordsmithing. So the stop that Jackson and the D.C. Circuit found to be unjustified occurred after a call over a suspicious vehicle at 2 a.m. When they arrived, 2 people ran from the car, and the remaining passenger began backing out of the parking lot with the door still open, which, you guessed it, that's also illegal. Justice Jackson said that those facts were not sufficient for the requisite suspicion of cops to make that stop. So again, car somewhere, 2 a.m, car shows up, the police car, the patrol car shows up, 2 people sprint away from the vehicle, the other person driving, door still open, backing away, trying to escape from the cop. Ketanji Brown Jackson, again, whose only Supreme Court bona fides are summarized as being nominated once for an Emmy or a Grammy or whatever. Ketanji Brown Jackson has decided that that's not enough suspicion here. Insane stupidity. That is the kind of behavior. This is the kind of summary. These are the kind of justices that the left broadly want to put on the Supreme Court, who look at that and say, well, I know the law says something, but if you follow what the law says or what the Constitution says or what federal precedent says or what federal law says, or again, I suppose federal regulation and its accordance to federal law and the Constitution, that's wordsmithing. And actually, have we considered feelings? Have we considered them feelings in this moment? So thrilling stuff. Now, also the Supreme Court issued a little throw out there that the White House does, in fact, have to pay back companies for the tariffs. Now, this is getting a lot of scorn online because people are saying that it's Americans who need to be given the option to collect the, what is it, $160 billion in tariffs? And 330,000 importers across 53 million shipments, $166 billion expected to be eligible there. So refunds plus interest is suggested to be paid, or the opportunity to be paid, in 60 to 90 days. I can already see some of the appeals coming up in that particular ruling as well. The Supreme Court also has agreed to take up a challenge to Colorado's Democrat law that strips any funding from Catholic preschools, filing a suit here, if they refuse to accept children with same-sex parents. So Catholic schools saying, hey, we only support, again, the traditional lifestyle, those who have same-sex parents. We don't agree with that. No. The Colorado Democrat pushed law that says, hey, you need to actually accept anybody. You can't reject or refuse anybody here. The Supreme Court is taking this particular case up.
A group of Catholic schools wants the U.S. Supreme Court to change the rules for Colorado's universal preschool program. Those schools in the Denver Archdiocese argue that they should be able to discriminate against same-sex parents and still get public funding. This is a battle that faith-based schools in Colorado have been fighting since the school funded preschool 2 years ago.
Now, it'll be interesting to see how that's, kind of how that's rolling around. We're going to get to some other really, really wild stories. Again, the United Arab Emirates, as well as the United States, a Federal Bureau of Investigation, but the Department of Homeland Security participated in this arrest as well. An Iranian woman accused of selling bombs, drones, and machine guns in support of the Islamic regime, getting arrested at LAX. Man, Los Angeles International's got a lot of arrests of foreign terrorists, whether the Chinese guy smuggling a little bit of biological agents, or whether we're talking here about selling weapons to Iranian-backed groups. Insane stuff for sure. Right now, we're going to flip over to a great conversation regarding what's actually coming next, what we're looking for out of the House. No, not with going and yelling at socialist conventions in Spain, but actually with some of the developing news in the Middle East. So we're going to chat with Pat Harrigan and then get to some of the other kind of broader news here on the Tony Kinnett Cast. Good to be joined again by our friend Representative Pat Harrigan from North Carolina's 10th Congressional. Busy week ahead of us. How you doing, sir?
Hey, Tony. Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Well, let's hop right in. The news from Iran over the weekend was a roller coaster with wings. So we got word that there were maybe some attacks going on, maybe some cruise ships trying to sail their way through the Strait of Hormuz as well. Just an interesting selection of news. What's the House looking at with what's going on with Iran, I guess, over the weekend?
Well, basically, you had Iran open up the Strait of Hormuz and then I think very quickly close it again. And you had kind of two different factions here. You had a deal that was made between the administration and the foreign minister, those presumably in power in Iran, to open the strait. And then the IRGC came in and said, no, we're not listening to what the foreign minister said. We don't care what he said. The strait is closed. And so it kind of begs the question of, who's running the show over there? Who are we negotiating with? And do they have the requisite authorities? And I think bigger picture, the administration has to look at the timeline here and say, things are just dragging along. And I think we've got to understand that our adversaries understand the timeline in American politics. And there's an election in November. There's also the reality that President Trump isn't going to be here in 3 years. And so they're trying to drag everything out, whether it's Russia and Ukraine, not getting that done in the first couple of days of the administration. Here we are almost a year and a half in. It's still going. I think Iran is going to run the exact same playbook, which is try to run this out as long as possible, keep the protracted conflict moving, keep American dollars flowing. As the Afghans used to say, you Americans, you all may own the watches, but we own the time. And we need to be very cognizant of that. This thing needs to end, and it needs to end very quickly. And the president needs to do whatever he needs to do in order to accomplish that goal.
So let's game it out a little bit here. Let's say the president, obviously trying to move forward and get this thing over as quickly as possible. He doesn't want to give them the opportunity to kind of run out the clock anymore. What kind of options do you see kind of short on the table here? Again, I'm not asking you to speak on behalf of anyone in the administration, but just over in the House, given the amount of time that you're spending looking on these particular policies and kind of routes and levers, what's being talked about, what do you see as maybe a way the president and his administration might end some of this, I don't want to say too soon, but in a manner that has some finality with it?
Yeah, I think that we've all got some significant hope that the peace talks that are going to happen in Pakistan again, starting later this evening, are going to bear some fruit. Everything that we have been told is that actually Vice President J.D. Vance got really, really close to a deal, that Iran, the United States were really close. And so hopefully we can kind of bring that across the finish line. I think that we have shown through the blockade that we can really mess with the economics of the Iranian regime. And look, all conflicts ultimately boil down to economics. Who can outlast the other? And if the Iranian regime ends up in an economic pinch, which they certainly would from a continued blockade, that threatens their ability to maintain control of 93 million people in Iran. And so that's an existential crisis for them. And so hopefully what we've done over the last 10 days or so will kind of yield a better baseline for a productive long-term peace in the region that I think assures some of our strategic concerns that, number one, Iran isn't going to have nuclear material. They're not going to develop a nuclear weapon. Number two, they're not going to continue to pursue a very robust ballistic missile program. And that certainly poses an incredible threat to the United States and its allies, particularly as the rate of the production of their ballistic missiles significantly exceeds the production of our interceptors, which is a big problem. And number three, we don't want Iran to export terrorism or, be a regional thorn in the side of those who are trying to pursue commerce and instead have the Iranian regime pursue chaos. We don't want that to happen. And so when you take the collective of all those things and you're offering Iran a seat at the table if they choose commerce instead of chaos, I think you do have a prescriptive set of circumstances for a long-term durable peace that's secured not just by the United States of America, but by all of Iran's regional allies. I think that's possible. But short of that, there's not a whole ton of options that look really good. Certainly President Trump has talked about destroying bridges, destroying power plants, effectively turning Iran into Afghanistan and kind of walking away. leaving them unable to militarily constitute themselves and be that thorn in the side of the West. Hopefully we don't have to go there, but we might. And time is one of those things that we just don't have. We have to understand that as we just secured some of the most significant and certainly from a monetary perspective, the greatest tax returns that we've ever had in the history of our country, that our people are plowing that right into their gas tanks right now. It is not helping affordability. It's hurting affordability. So that's definitely got to be part of the administration's calculus as we ramp into the midterm elections in November.
Well, one of the ways to kind of structurally change the eternal outlook for the region is for the United States to recognize perhaps different entities altogether. There's been a lot of this conversation regarding Somaliland as opposed to Somalia. There's a question as to whether the Kurds are going to rise up as kind of an independent Kurdistan, or ethnic regions breaking away over in the Iranian East. Just kind of as a final note here, do you see the United States possibly recognizing an independent Kurdistan or recognizing some kind of Balkanization if the country breaks between different ethnic groups? I know this has been a conversation in previous administrations, but I'm just kind of curious if there is any of that undertext going on over in the House by a kind of ratification formally in the House and Senate.
Yeah, there's no question that is ongoing. What effect that will have, I think, remains to be seen.
Right.
And I don't know that the analysis that I've seen publicly is accurate to the facts and the reality of the relationships on the ground.
As often
and I think although some of it could absolutely work in the strategic interests of the United States, some of that could also backfire. Just like everything in the Middle East always seems to be a double-edged sword, right? I think we have to understand that from a geopolitical and an economic perspective. There are levers that we can pull, but those levers don't just come with benefits. They also come with second and third order consequences. So it's definitely an interesting time for the future of the Middle East. I think that there's a lot of opportunity here. I also think that there's a lot of risk.
Right. So kind of to wrap things up, final question here, kind of to tilt things back towards the homeward side. Last question here for you. The Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has decided that kind of some strategic reorganization might be in his best interest, calling trade ties with the United States a weakness to Canada, and that they might want to, start pivoting around to more Chinese allies there, eh? From your perspective in the House and also in North Carolina with the different trade economies that you guys maintain, because you guys, again, North Carolina has an extremely diverse manufacturing and then different agricultural industries that are not just national but international. What do you see kind of moving forward regarding maybe how the United States is being treated as kind of a trade partner around the world?
Well, I think that the Canadian perspective is incredibly short-sighted. Number one, I don't think it should surprise us, unfortunately, that a socialistic country would want to do business and more business with a communistic country in China. I also think it is a reflective of a complete misunderstanding of geography. The United States and Canada have a long history of very significant trade, primarily because we have a shared geography. It just makes sense. There's a lot of things that the United States does and has and produces that are really good for Canada. And there's a lot of natural resources that Canada trades with the United States that is mutually beneficial for both countries. I think as we get into and have been in a little bit of a relational impasse, all parties still need to keep the big picture in focus, which is what are the real threats and who's the real enemy here? We might bicker against one another. Certainly we feel like we have very legitimate, logical points that we're making about where Canada has gone and where that has not been in their strategic interest, but where that's also had a follow-on, knock-on set of consequences for our strategic interests that we're frustrated about. The way that we deliver that has not been received well by Canada, but all things being equal, we still got to understand what's right within that policy that we're trying to confer, what's right from their perspective in terms of how we're delivering the message. Can we change those things? Because what's really stupid is running into the hands of all of our greatest strategic adversaries that probably any of our nations have ever had, which is China. That will be an unbelievably destabilizing force, not just for the United States, but also for Canada. So I take that attitude as very much cutting off your nose to spite the face, right? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense from the long-term perspective of Canada's readiness, their ability to trade. But you know what? TDS is a real thing. And our allies seem to have a healthy bit of it right now. I wish we could all just calm down and see the bigger picture.
Well, as Pat Harrigan, representative of North Carolina's 10th, again, bigger picture stuff, common sense approaches. Appreciate you giving us another couple of minutes. Always good to check in with you. And again, kind of what you're seeing on the ground over on the House.
Tony, always great to be with you, and have a great rest of your day and have a good week.
You too, man.
See ya. Bye.
Now, I've referenced just a little bit of some of the international stuff. Europe is losing their mind. So for the bonus tonus side of things for tonight's show, I've got to share with you what you're definitely not hearing, kind of on the mainstream news side of things. So there are a couple of countries, a few on the European side of things, that are very well aware that you actually have to spend money on your own defenses. And while NATO has been giving the president of the United States the finger until the United States came in to do the work. And then the French and the English and the Germans and the Italians say, oh, we are ready to be of assistance, like that kind of crap. Well, the president has said, well, tell you what, you're not going to help the United States, then I guess you can handle Russia all on your own. And unfortunately, one of the individuals, or I should say one of the countries that is going to bear the brunt of that first is a country like Estonia. Now, Estonia has, throughout its short time span here with us as a free country, since it, again, was one of the first to say see ya to the Soviets right before the attempted 1991 coup and the fall of the Soviet Union. Cry about it, Hassan Piker. Well, the Estonians actually do put forward a large amount of money towards arming themselves. And then the Europeans are supposed to put forward an amount of money towards helping Estonia and the countries up against Russia defend themselves. And then the United States also offered to throw in some money behind it. And then, I know this is going to shock you, the Europeans did nothing and just said the United States is just going to pay for it forever. We are going to spend all of our money on socialized healthcare and then lecture the United States for not funding our defense and funding really garbage healthcare programs. And so now the European leaders are freaking out because, what do you have, like some German arms? God knows the Brits can't make a rifle that won't jam 817. I mean, goodness gracious. Smuckers should sponsor British arms manufacturing. I've never seen horrible arms production like the Limeys. Anyway, so, then you have Ireland, which is basically half Islamic, half Indian at this point. And so what do you have in the rest of Europe? Germans sort of producing some arms occasionally when they're not cutting off their own power. And then Poland? So a lot of European countries are very, very, very scared because the United States is holding up all weapons deliveries to all of these EU countries. Now, what is Europe doing to sweet talk the United States back to helping them out? They're considering the Digital Services Act. The Digital Services Act, a series of legal restrictions against American social media in the European Union. Why? Because they really don't like the United States saying things like, hey, don't mass import Islamic migrants into your country because it's bad. Well, that's, you're only allowed to, really go after those dirty, dirty Christians and Jews, according to the European Union. So how about no? And they also really don't like the United States saying, hey, socialism is bad. I know. Horrible, evil, right-wing Nazi stuff. Unless it's Spain, then you can be, as Nazi as you'd like. So it's bizarre. The Alliance Defending Freedom is doing a pretty stellar job of trying to get the information out on the Digital Services Act, which Europe is trying as hard as they can to push. Jeremy Tedesco, he's the senior counsel and the senior vice president over at ADF, pointed out what happens in Europe does not stay in Europe. It gets exported. The EU is pressuring big tech to censor Americans on American platforms. Essentially, they are requiring all of these American tech companies to follow EU law in the United States. So if you do something that upsets the Frenchies or the Germans, well, then they're going to ask the tech companies to censor you. Otherwise, they're not going to allow the European market to be open to places like X, Meta, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, etc. So the Alliance Defending Freedom is doing a pretty excellent job of trying to push back against this kind of stuff. It's, again, one of the reasons why, for yours truly, I'm thrilled that the Alliance Defending Freedom is sponsoring the show. They are a Christian legal ministry dedicated to advancing the important stuff: free speech, as we just talked about, religious freedom, sanctity of life, parental rights, God's design for marriage and the family, like the stuff in Colorado with Catholic schools. They've scored pretty huge legal victories. Everything from toppling Roe v. Wade to securing a landmark free speech win at SCOTUS a couple of weeks ago on behalf of Christian counselor Kaylee Chiles. They're fighting some of our culture's most pressing issues, from the protection of women's sports to defending unborn lives. And ADF relies not on foreign dollars like ActBlue. No. They rely on the generous support of people like you to protect freedom in the courtroom and the culture. For a limited time, every dollar that you give to the Alliance Defending Freedom will be matched. That means $25 becomes $50. $50 becomes $100 only while these matched funds last. So go to joinadf.com/Tony today, or text Tony to 83848 to have your gift to the ADF doubled. That's joinadf.com/Tony to text or text Tony, Tony, to 83848 to double your impact for freedom. And a huge, huge thank you to the Alliance Defending Freedom for their sponsorship of the show. Again, always nice when actually groups that I believe in want to participate in that kind of a thing. Now, over to some of the extra bonus tonus news side of things this evening. So I did tell you that there were some things the FBI had done that was exceptional. By the way, I should point out, we are following some of the updates on the shooting near Winston-Salem Middle School in North Carolina today. The two people confirmed dead, apparently a situation of two juveniles planning to fight each other at a park. And then, of course, we're following the situation regarding the Shreveport shooting, a father killing several of his children over the weekend. We're going to hold off reporting on those in their entirety right now, just because I'm still waiting on a couple of reports, some information specifically out of Shreveport. Representative Fields, Cleo Fields, he's the Democrat representative of Shreveport, Louisiana. Baton Rouge, Alexandria, and Shreveport. I'm going to hold off just for a little bit until tomorrow to give you some of those details, because I want to make sure that I do that justice. I do also want to point out on the international side of things, there is a very, very large C-17 air bridge that's all kinds of supply and refueling tankers on their way to the Middle East. I would expect, after the president issued this statement, quote, "Well, they're going to negotiate, and if they don't, they're going to see problems like they've never seen before," end quote. He said, hopefully they make a fair deal and they'll build their country back up. Trump continued, adding that when they do so, they will not have a nuclear weapon. That's CNN reporting this. That said, there are a couple of Triton surveillance drones. I haven't seen an MQ-4C up in ages. There's some interesting stuff in developments going on regarding the Middle East with Iran. The president says if they don't make a deal, it's bridge and power plant day, fiesta. I mean, we'll have to see how that goes. So those updates, keeping an eye on them. Regarding domestic operations against some of this Iranian influence, the Justice Department reported, quote, Shamim Mafi, 44, of Woodland Hills, California, was arrested at Los Angeles International Airport for trafficking arms on behalf of the government of Iran. She is charged with a violation of 50 U.S. Code Section 1705 for brokering the sale of drones, bombs, bomb fuses, and millions of rounds of ammunition manufactured by Iran and then sold to Sudan. So a funding pipeline for the Iranian regime. Essentially, she provides some of the drones and the bombs and the bomb fuses and other Acme dynamite kit stuff to Iran. Iran then sells that to their terror proxies around the Middle East and Africa. So she is reportedly a part of the 2,000 green cards that Obama gave to suspected members of the kind of greater, broader Islamic information. Prosecutors say that Mafi was granted permanent U.S. residency in California under Barack Obama and lived there for years. I will also point out that while living in the United States, like pretty much all of these regime proxy individuals, she was living really high on the hog. Oh, excuse me. I guess I shouldn't say that with Islam. She was living really high on the goat and showing off her luxurious lifestyle in social media. How are other countries handling this? In the United Arab Emirates, the UAE sent in a crew of law enforcement to arrest members of an Iranian-linked cell accused of plotting, quote, systematic terrorist and sabotage acts. And it's an Iranian-linked cell, not an Israeli Mossad cell. I know that Tucker Carlson, when he's not busy promoting Islam as the true religion of Jesus, that, you know, he said that Mossad is trying to destroy Saudis and the UAE and whatever. Well, the UAE is actually arresting those as members of Iranian terror cells. So this comes after a series of attacks on Gulf neighbors. And again, the continued skepticism of the media regarding the United Arab Emirates and a strike on an Iranian island. All right, last but not least, the bonus square of the bonus tonus here. I want to talk a little bit about a very bizarre sort of Senate, sort of presidential run that's happening in Georgia. I'm serious. I was forwarded this story over by our Daily Signal Bureau crew over on the Georgia side of things. Bradley Devlin, our political editor, put this up for my attention because right now, Ossoff should be riding a lot higher as the senator in his election. Again, he's facing Republicans that are not through their primary yet. There's Carter, there's Collins, there's Dooley. He is within the margin of error against every single one of these Republicans, which is not something that was expected, again, the last time that Ossoff was running and dealing with things back in 2020. Now, that ended up in, again, the polling data was much more in his favor, and then it headed into a runoff and things got a little bit spicy. But Ossoff doesn't appear to be doing a Senate campaign run. The Democrats appear to be grooming him for a presidential run. Jon Ossoff, not just for the Georgia Senate, but maybe for president. Now, we've seen this kind of thing before. We've seen this with Beto in Texas, you know. He's just such a friend of the people, which means middle-aged white women Democrats post pictures of him on Facebook. That's what's going on with Jon Ossoff right now. So 20-something politicos on the Democrat side of the aisle that worked for kind of corporatist Democrat offices in D.C. are raving about Ossoff. And then middle-aged leftist women, you know, again, who either look like Pumbaa from The Lion King, Jennifer Welch, Nicole Wallace, you know, over Botox blonde lady, or, you know, Steve Carell with shorter, spikier gray hair. Like those are the three. All of those people are really excited about Jon Ossoff. He's doing some like anti-Richard Nixon messaging. Bizarre.
While he and his family rake in billions from foreign princes. While he plunders our health care to cut taxes for the rich. Meanwhile, rent, power, groceries, and health care have all hit all-time highs this year.
Okay, so this is his message. Again, we've talked about this before. This is the Democrat line of messaging here going into 2026. Donald Trump is a crook. He's getting personally wealthy. He's given tax cuts to all his rich billionaire buddies, and you all are suffering. It's very, very hard to tell people this while they are receiving a bigger tax cut than they ever have. It's hard to do that. I'm just going to level with you right there, then and there. Number two, you can't propose this is your running message while simultaneously not proposing something that's going to lower the cost of stuff. Remember, Democrats' entire plan is hike up the taxes on everything and then pump government money into healthcare and to public schools. Please, I'm looking for any of you to tell me, how do any of the Democrats, pick a Democrat senator, any one of them, tell me any of their proposals that are going to lower costs on energy. By all means, tell me one. One. So far, what they say is we're going to invest in green energy, which is not going to lower the cost of energy at all. Rent control. That ain't going to do it either. So he's, oh man, these things are really, really bad right now. Okay, that is a turnout problem for Republicans. That does not automatically mean everyone's going to come out and vote for Democrat. This is the message. Ossoff has a very, very good charismatic Pete Buttigieg, but like kind of more closeted. You know what I mean? Like that's like his thing, right? It's the same James Tallarico. It's very basic cookie cutter white guy. And I say that as a conservative broadcaster who looks like every other conservative broadcaster, okay? I get the cookie cutter thing, all right? There's nothing special about Beto, Tallarico, Buttigiegio, whatever here. Skinny Pritzker ain't gonna do it.
Meanwhile, rent, power, groceries, and health care.
Shout out to the person who ignored the teleprompter and wooed way later. Probably Ketanji Brown Jackson. That kind of slow usually reserves itself for her decisions.
Have all hit all-time highs this year. This year. Ground beef's up 20% since Trump took office. Coffee.
I love the way they had that. I can't even make a hamburger. I appreciate that. I do. I'm sorry. I enjoy pro-crowd heckling. I have nothing to say there. I just think it's funny. No comments other than that LOL. Also, do you have something that will reduce the price of the ground beef? What do you have? What is the thing that you have? Now, the common sense answer here would be that more of a free market solution reducing regulations, because that's kind of the answer. That's a proven answer economically. It just is. But you're not going to do that. There's no Democrat who's going to do this. That's not a suggestion. What do you have?
40%. Health premiums through the roof. And remember, while you pay more for everything, the first family's wealth is growing by billions of dollars.
Again, the man's not taking a salary. Trump's not taking a salary. The dude's already wealthy. This doesn't work. And when people can easily point to like Ilhan Omar, who went from nothing to a whole lot of something in the bank account, and again, all the insider trading that Nancy Pelosi and Elizabeth Warren have been accused of, no. By the way, did you notice the reason he ended on healthcare is because that's all they've got. They have public education. We need to give teachers unions more money, and we need to nationalize, socialize healthcare. That's all they've got. That's the Bernie Sanders line. That's all he's ever had. He can't tell you how he's going to lower prices. He can't explain it. Because the only time that Bernie Sanders has suggested anything was the union lady, and she's out having sex with a security guard. And also, he suggests the tariffs. And when Trump did the tariffs, the left's had nothing to do with it. It's kind of funny. The tariffs were a political win for Trump, not because they worked. They didn't. They were a political win for Trump because the man took away any messaging on the left. Any. Because that's always their suggestion. They have nothing. And it's really funny. As the free market conservative side of things, it's a really big LOL. I mean, yeah, I don't appreciate the whole falling on the spear thing either. But to see Ossoff not be able to suggest anything but give me money, me. Okay.
Because they're crooks. And
that's it. That's the line. And they're saying this makes him, I'm not joking, all of the 20-something guys you've never heard of, and then all of the middle-aged liberal ladies are all saying, oh, that's it, run him for president. If he runs in the primary, he's going to win. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I'm not sure. So curious stuff out of Georgia as well. And we've got other things to cover kind of on the general Senate side of the news this year as well. There's some news out of Ohio that we're going to cover later this week. We'll have Rebecca Downs, our Ohio correspondent, on. Some Maine, maybe some Alaska stuff. I know, you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh man, Maine and Alaska news, let's go. We'll have to tackle some of these things tomorrow. Also, I mean, people running for elections in Georgia like Aaron Baker, who's saying that he wants to, transform Georgia's House of Representatives because he cut his testicles off. And he's saying, we need more trans stuff. Best of luck to you. Best of luck. All right, I'd say that's a fair amount. I did want to thank, before we are out tonight, a couple people who gave very, very kind super chats. Zilla rating, $10 super chat. Dave, 3156. Very, very, very kind. Appreciate that. He did ask a question, Dave, on the fine. He said, so if we get a no nuke agreement with Iran, do you think that they buy nukes from North Korea or China after the agreement? the whole buying nukes from somebody else doesn't really go very well. Even countries who want or don't mind, China really doesn't like that North Korea has nukes. That's the kind of the dirty secret. Countries don't like other countries having nukes. There are no other countries that have nukes. Once you have nukes, you are fully on the no one else should have nukes train. That's the real fun secret of the nuke program. The United Kingdom, when it was pursuing nukes, the Soviet Union was trying to keep the United Kingdom from getting nukes. Do you know who else was trying to keep the United Kingdom from getting nukes? The United States of America. And then when the French were doing their testing, the United States, the Soviet Union, and the British were all trying to keep France from getting the. I mean, that's a tale as old as time. So no, China really doesn't want Iran to have nukes, because then Iran doesn't really need China. So kind of the fun communists propping others. I mean, you'll notice Cuba, during the entire time the Soviet Union was around, Cuba never got its own nukes. It was kind of a whole crisis over that sort of thing. All right, I'd say that's good there. Oh, another super chat right before we're done from Mark and Jennifer Shelton. Very kind of you. You guys don't have to give super chats, by the way. You know how to do that? Just hang around, like and subscribe. That helps us a ton. She says, thanks so much for your thorough and honest reporting and down-to-earth commentary. Also, awesome impersonations. I really appreciate that, because we do get emails that say, cut it out with the voices. And so as a compromise, I'm learning more voices just for you. So appreciate you guys stopping by. We'll be back tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern, to talk about quite a bit more, and maybe answer some of your questions about my imperialistic desires on Alberta or North Dakota. It's the Tony Kennett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.